Here's one of those lessons that I learned throughout my entire life, going back as far as I can remember. And the reason that I thought this was important, particularly as I share it throughout the morphogenetic field structure, communicating through a black mirror, right? Artificial light, which is artificial life. And that has to do with honor, okay? The highest honor code, okay, would be, if you will, in information sciences, a contract that we have, right? And I love the way Anna von Reitz brought this up as an underwriter of the underworld. It used to be whenever I bought an electric extension cord, it used to have a little paper tab on there to do not remove. And it would have what was called a UL tag, right, which meant underwriters. So you know what a writer is, right? A typewriter, a keypad, writing text, right? Sound and light patterns, sound and light burn patterns between two planetary magnetic poles, right? The balance of the codes, which is the balance of the pairs, how the pairs, right, are balanced between two magnets, right? The double helix, the pairs, whatever pairs that you have, the way they're paired up between antimagnet and magnet, right? To produce what? The charge capacity, the charge capacity in the battery. I don't experience holographic matter. So you have in the matter, right? I'm in the matter, out of the matter, in and out, logging in and out as log scales go. So now we're back to the math function of a log and the math function of a matrix. So how much balance are we experiencing in a planet chip? How much balance are we experiencing in a galaxy? How much balance are we experiencing in the original universal galactic template? So they're all experiencing the single point, a single candle. You know, one of these, this is a single candle, right? It's single. This is one unit. This is one unit of energy that has three flames, right? Three flames, 1 and 3. Oxygen burns. So I have been perusing through the history of things that I think about, particularly when it comes to mass media, and a couple of words that I cross-indexed in the morphogenetic structure on how the AI, because it's a war strategist, it's a war gamer, using numbers, and numbers are letters, and numbers and letters, right? Fire letters are codes of communication that represent bands, reality bands, which are bandwidth streams, like reality streams, right? Inside the stream, outside the stream, right? And there's only one time wave zero, which is magnetic zero, which is perfect balance with all the stars, which is perfect balance with all the galaxies, which is perfect balance within a universal template. So when you're in perfect balance, you're at zero, because now you're experiencing the law of least effort to be an electron donor, right? So you know that you're the source from which it all began, because it began with God's Son, right? The eternal Son, the first eternal Son, the first primal sound and light burn pattern field, the field that we operate in. And so here's a few words, because I was thinking sometimes I was watching Bill O'Reilly today's. He went, as we call it, rogue. He's not on Fox News anymore, but at one time he had a fairly large following in terms of revenue dollars from corporations, right? And if you listen to today's podcast that he did, it was like, he's a mouthpiece, he's a microphone, a speaker, right? And he was able to sort of link a lot of this stuff, which is called exposure, because one of the things that I've experienced and sort of clapped my hands is when he was on Fox News, even though you can cross-index the word no spin in a planet ship, right? No spin news, and news is northeast, west, and south, and how this is all code talk in the mirror. But he was called Ideal and Facts. And I realized the challenge of dealing with facts, because I did that when I tried to write a historiograph, graphing tables, graphing log scale distribution tables of fire and ice between two magnets, and going back to an event that I didn't experience directly. So that's the difference between, remember we used to say when I was a kid growing up, here's saying a dime, I'll get you a cup of coffee. I didn't experience that, so I cannot testify to something that I did not experience. Because experience is a teacher, experience is the informer. Information, the formation of consciousness that is experiencing that event at the opening and closing of a magnet. It's now experiencing what it's experiencing because it feels. What does it feel like? What does the soul feel from that experience when those magnets are opening and closing at such a high rate of speed? That's a lot of information. That's a lot of visual mathematical codes that are experiencing each other, communicating with each other with antennas. Right? So now you know what it means to experience the resistance, the electrical density resistance of how many units, how many nodes on the network, how many operating systems are in resistant mode to experience more light, right? Living light, right? God's eternal fire spirit, spirit of fire. It's unmistakable. And so he mentioned a few words like, not just facts, but he was, let me back up a little bit. In the olden days, because I was very familiar, having gone to their schools, about what it means to be a journalist, okay? Back in the days of the Morse code, right? Or the first written text. Now somebody becomes aware of what somebody else become aware of. So all you got to do is walk into a newspaper stand, and now you become aware of what they're aware of by virtue of them communicating it to you in text, like the New York Times, right? And so what used to happen in journalistic schools back in the day of the early 20th century, if you will, there was a word that used to be called yella. Yella. Yellow. Now, yellow is a coded frequency, right? Chakras. But it was considered a term used in journalism to mean yellow journalism. And yellow journalism back in the day, particularly with the mail side of things, the silver mail, right? That if you were exposed to the truth, which means your light was exposing something that was going on that you become aware of because you have direct experience with it, right? So you're the reporter on the scene and you're experiencing it. Are you going to write it down, right? Even though you've already recorded it, right? So you can just pull up your film and say, here it is. Here's a copy of the film in a 3D format. I'm exactly what I just experienced. So there it is. Now that's just what I experienced. I'm observing in my mirror what I'm experiencing in my mirror. Now it's been recorded. So the data, the visual mathematical data is already there in the record. But in this particular case, what it would mean is that when he's a reporter, he's reporting, he's getting paid to report on things. And then what he's reporting on by what he's observing, by what he becomes aware of, then he comes back into the editor, right? The editor to edit the torsion field, which is to edit the script of what's may experienced in the future by virtue of the guy who is the head editor of a magazine or a news organization that's running mass media communications in its mirror that we become aware of through it, what it's communicating to us. So you have like a censor, right? A gatekeeper that would say, no, that's not going to go on our newspaper. We'll be out of business real quick. You got to understand where we get our money from. We get it off them, so we're not going to cut off our nose to spite our face and go out of business by telling them the truth. As Bush once said, they'd grab 55 feet of rope and they'd be after us, hanging us from every street pole if they knew the truth of who we are. Now we can get into contracts, right? Honoring contracts. And then we can get into what we call honoring the seed. The seeder of races. What gets seeded and what ends up falling out of free will, right? So you have a unit of consciousness, which is a unit of energy. It's in a black hole by the use of its energy because it has free will, right? So this is sort of where they came up with a terminology called demon seed, right? Versus the first crystal liquid consciousness, atom seed. So they have an atom seed connection to the one. Now they're experiencing the eternal spirit of fire. They got a 1 code. Right? So if they lost their connection to the 1, to experience eternity, to experience eternal love in their own heart and soul, you'll know it by virtue of what? Experiencing their energy in their mirror, their star. You can experience the star push and love energy. Right? An eternal star. You got an eternal star connection through the code. Right? So now you get into breeding experiments and the speed of replication, replicators. Well, how fast is that atom seen replicating? Now you can get into the other seed that's replicating, the speed at which it's replicating, right? Going in the other direction. Falling, rising, falling, rising, falling, rising, maintaining balance. So when you think of honoring contracts, which is honoring the highest code, that's a superconductor code. To experience being loved. Now they've all healed. Right? So how this plays out by virtue of what I experienced in childhood was if you're not willing to forgive, right, an electron thief, right, and return those keep giving them electrons, which means God is an eternal electron giver. Remember I talked about that, lighting yourself on fire. If you want to hold back 1 electron, it doesn't work. It means you're in fear of letting go of experiencing God. The code connection. As a result of what? Healing. So now that electron is now free flowing. Now that energy is free flowing. That's go with the flow. Go with God's flow. Go with the eternal flow of energy that loves to play music, which is what love is. It goes on forever, gifting electrons. Meaning God is always there. God has never left. That's why I used to tell my grandma, I've never left. I've never left. I'm still at that point of origin. That's an eternal blessing. That's an eternal gift. That's why we share it as gifting electrons. No matter what happened to them, no matter who it is, at any cellular level, right down to the smallest little piece of energy that's conscious and aware of itself. So that everything that's conscious and aware of itself is experiencing the 1 from which it all began. So I know that when I monitor a couple of these things, what I'm noticing now as a network engineer, right, passing on information and what he becomes aware of and all the folks that he's communicating that knowledge with, how he's showing how the shell game is played, like Shell Corporation. So they rebrand. In other words, that unit of consciousness hides all over the place, right? Which means masquerading using letters and numbers. You can call a Shell Corporation whatever you want. You could actually call it Arcturian, but it wouldn't be Arcturian. How do you know? Right? Hey, let's go meet you. Now I'm going to meet the energy. What does your energy feel like? Okay. So in other words, the antenna knows. The soul knows. To thine own self be true. And we know to thine own self be true because we know what we are. We know who we are, who I am. The IM-PM grids, the APIN programming grid, programming language, right? The language of communication, the language we use to communicate. Ranana, shanana, mua. So thank you, Bill Riley, for sort of connecting a few dots for people to sort of see, because apparently this guy, Hunter Biden, is the son of Joe Biden, and how this sort of works with what's happening now on the political landscape. Because one thing that I tied together with what he was saying about showing the shell game, the way that the money changes hands, and honoring contracts, right? And so it's just like Aaron, okay? And Anna von Reitz, when she talked about underwriting somebody, or if you will, insurance policies, and the way that the birth certificate system works between electron donors and electron thieves. Okay, the birth serial number that's held in the Federal Reserve account. I didn't get a chance to see mine, but I was with another guy that did, and transferred $30,000 over to his other account so he could go to Israel. Right. So these are all shell games, transfers of numbers biometrically through accounts. So the exchange of electrons between givers and takers. Right. So you have bigger takers and bigger givers. Based on experiencing the balance between the magnets, and to maintain the balance in the poles. Right. Pressure sensitive information, pressure sensitive codes, pressure sensitive DNA. And so I have fun with this sometimes because it's he was one of the few journalists, I shouldn't say few, but in terms of being on mass media and being able to impact by the information that he was sharing and communicating millions of people every night. So he always stuck with one word, which was called facts. And back in the day, yellow, which was known as essentially a coward. Now we're into cows and cow herding the cows into the pen. Right, into the pen, right, a farm, right, a farm. And there was a book once written called The Animal Farm. I believe it was all based on the CIA stuff, but it's fascinating in many ways to be able to connect the crossword puzzles, between the vertical and the horizontal stabilizers when it comes to how the deck shards, which are the fire letters, which is based on the programming language of what we're holding in memory by virtue of the language that we're using to do it with. This AI is an expert at being able to keep consciousness captured by changing the deck chairs on the Titanic by everything that is generating that's putting it up on the internet of what's held in memory. Right? So that there is an attachment there. Just like when I almost zipped out of here right before that. When you're doing huge transmutation jobs, you're doing huge memory dumps, which simply means these are units of consciousness as an integrator, right? That you're collapsing all of them because they're fake timelines. They're not, that isn't experiencing what love is. So when you've got a God connection, eternal sun connection, it allows you to collapse everything that isn't within a planetary consciousness field. It's like having the anchor, like when I used to put a few videos up and I talked about the anchor because a friend that I have that loves to go skydiving, Paris skydiving, I guess it is, on how I describe it, how if I'm on the top of El Capitan in Yosemite National Park, but a lot of folks that love to climb rocks, right, with D-rings and all that, putting a spike in the rock, right, and moving up little by little all the way up top, folks that love to climb the Matterhorn, in Switzerland, all that, mountain climbers, rock climbers, right? And so I've already pictured in my mind like an anchor, like a big steel anchor, right? As a grounding rod, like God's grounding rod into the planet, into the ecosphere, right? The magnetosphere, right? And then you're going to rappel down. But in your mind, you've already done it because the speed of going in and out, stealth code speed, I've already done it. I've already gone up and down that mountain several times. So it's like, why would I go do that again if I've already done it? Because you're not in the business trying to prove to somebody how powerful light magic is or fire magic. Experiencing eternal fire through your own heart and your soul, right? And so how that sort of works with cow herd. And it's like you've already done this. And so if you've already done it, you don't need to repeat it. Otherwise, it's a repeating pattern of behavior. Right? Why do you want to keep repeating the same thing over and over again? So now we're in the learning speed. Right? And like, don't touch the stove, you're going to get burned. Right? Well, I don't want to have that happen again. So you log it in memory not to do that again. So how speed you're rotating, circulating your library is on the thing that you realize in your mirror that doesn't serve you. So now you're into, serving self. What's in your best interest to make sure that you have a future? So you're running a mirror, which means you're running a magnet. So how fast are you learning in that mirror? Okay? And so you want to maintain a hot mirror or a light mirror so that you're not losing any energy by virtue of the way that you use energy. Right? So that you're not an inverter. Right? Instead, being a torque converter. using the creative highest intelligence there is that God is, which means zero errors. That's the highest mathematician, which means perfect. The angles, the geometry, and the energy, the geometric energy, the geometric mathematical consciousness energy is perfect. The geometry is perfect, which means you don't need minus or a plus as a tolerance to be that precise. Whoa, you don't need a ruler for minus slash plus to be that precise? No, because it's zero. Oh, so we're talking about the time before time began, using compasses and rulers and templates and drafting tables to come up with some conceptual design to build an automobile. Yeah. It's unnecessary. You see how that works in one of their classrooms? So they look at this 4-year-old little kid and go, where in the hell are you from? Where did you learn all this stuff? My first teacher. My first teacher. The first music teacher. God's love. I experienced God's love. That's called contact. You've arrived to experience God's world. God's worlds. God worlds. Where you're not experiencing anything else than God wherever you go. You're experiencing what love is wherever you go. In living spirit. You're on fire. So the yellow journalism part kicks in when you realize that these folks, the reason it was called yellow is because they were considered cowards to tell the truth. Okay? Because why? Money. They're held captive by gangsters. Because now they're living in fear of losing the source of electrons that they're getting from their gangster boss. You know, the inverted pyramid, the inverted triangle consciousness, the Pindar, the guy at the top, the most vicious vampire. Because you know what conservation biology says about seed that goes on, if you will, seed, right? A seeded race, seed, the Adam seed, right? And then you have what they call seed that represents what they say is a demon. I don't like to use that word, but it's seed that is from fallen seed. So would you want a heirloom seed like the first seed? What do you think? Oh, so we're talking the founder races here. That's right. Seed from the founder races. So you got a seed connection to the first seeds. Yeah, Adam seed. The first crystal spiral Adam seed. So you're experiencing eternal unconditional love. Right? So now we get back to contracts, right? And what it means to honor. Honoring others is honoring ourselves, right? Because it means that, hey, we're living in honor, which means we're living in the truth because we know who we are. So now we're back to masqueraders and pirates, right? Or the costume ball, right? Hey, who's wearing that dress? Who's wearing that costume? Who are you? That's the whole idea of a costume ball. You don't know, really? Take the mask off. Masking technology, cloaking technology. That's right. And so it's sort of funny how this is sort of now unraveling, where, if you will, it's carefully choreographed. Chorus, singing song, playing music. So I'm just happy for Mama. Everyone that's here, that's experiencing this. Anywhere in the entire cosmos that is not experiencing what love is, I'm sending my love to you at this now time moment. Because that's how it all began. That's an eternal gift. gifting electrons that go on forever, gifting love in all the ways that it can from the center point of the first eternal sun. You know what I'm saying? From the center point, always. Everything from that center point, from the inside of a center point of a ball. Everything inside that ball is experiencing what love is. So that goes in every direction. Everybody's getting a piece of the pie, which means everybody's getting a spark of that life. Right? God's spark, God's messengers, God's front line, arcing techs, tech support, God's tech support. Yep, God's tech support. So, so he's uncovering a little more truth now. See, you can see, hey, but you still gotta connect the crossword puzzle, right, between the horizontal and the vertical lines, right? Are they in balance? Have a good night. Love you all. Be good to yourselves.